fraud detection and stolen funds. On Yavin, Cointelligence. Martin Kassin, Upvest. James O'Connell, MWB. Fredrico Nassire, Shyft. Moderated by Emma Todd, MMH Blockchain Group.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Welcome to this great panel. It's going to be the best panel you've heard all day. I'm telling you that right now. So just going to go ahead and we're going to do our introductions. We'll start with you, On.
Thank you. My name is Yavin, and I'm the founder and CEO of Cointelligence. At Cointelligence, we do data research and analysis for the crypto economy. We've been fully focusing on our ICO listing and rating system, and these days we are continuing to focus on the different aspects of the industry, such as exchanges and coins. And the most important part, in my opinion, is that we are hunting scammers. We make sure that every scammer out there that is trying to steal our money, the public's money, will be called out and advertised, so everyone will be able to know about it.
Excellent. Martin.
My name is Martin. I'm the CEO and founder of Upvest. We are a software company from Berlin, Germany. Around 18, 19 engineers. We develop key and transaction management APIs. So if you're a company, you want to offer your end users some wallets, you can use our solution and you don't have to hold the private keys. We also don't hold the private keys. We have developed a key management system around it that you actually have a much faster and more secure way to provide wallets for your end users.
James.
Well, first of all, wow, you can sit there for a long time, can't you? My name's James O'Connell. I'm a crypto lawyer from the UK. I'm here because fraud is something that comes across my desk quite often. Most recently, we had a situation with a police force in the UK which seized quite a lot of coin from a known or a suspected criminal. Didn't know what to do with it, so sold it. Then the case went ahead and the value of the coin went up. They sold it for £25,000 sterling. And by the time the case went to trial, it was worth £3.5 million. But they had sold it for 25,000. They were really hoping that this guy was going to go down. Otherwise, they'd be bust. So we're here to talk about fraud.
And Fredrico.
Certainly. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer and co-founder for Shyft. I'm also the President and CEO for Blockchain. At Shyft, we focus on facilitation of transmission of trusted data amongst companies that require compliance from a regulatory perspective. And at Blockchain, we focus on digitization of physical assets, such as precious metals, all the way to photovoltaics.
Excellent. So I'm Emma Todd. I am CEO of MMH Blockchain Group, and what my company does is we offer business strategy as well as marketing and PR to companies in the blockchain space. So James, I'm going to start with you. How prevalent is fraud in the blockchain space?
Well, it's very, very prevalent. Am I echoing a lot? Am I okay? Okay.
I think you're good.
Fraud tends to have three waves. The first wave we're seeing now, which is people who want to invest getting ripped off. In Australia, it's the second largest form of institutional theft is from blockchain. In the UK, people don't even bother reporting it to the police anymore because they're so overwhelmed. So that's the first stage we're at. The second stage, which is going to affect you guys at some point, because fraudsters always follow the money. The industry is now beginning to make money, so the fraudsters will soon be following you. And then the third stage of fraud is when you turn on each other when you've made money. We'll get that later, perhaps.
Looking forward to that one, definitely. How are we all going to turn on each other? I definitely want to know that. So, I'm curious, what are the different types of fraud that exist?
So the types of scams that we discovered is starting from just, it can be a kid or an anonymous hacker that is just building a website, usually a very simple website, and trying to get people to invest in an ICO that doesn't even exist. That's the first example. The second example is that we have seen in the industry a lot of the different rating websites or advisors that are actually helping people to sell their ventures for investors to get money, and they are helping them by using their name and vouching for them, and they just mislead the public. And another type of scams that we've been seeing a lot recently is ICOs that are actually lying about the amounts that they raised. They are saying that they raised $10 million. They didn't even raise $1 million. Some of them are using commitments and saying that they actually got the money. Some of them are just making up all kinds of amounts. And the last type that I would mention, because there are others, is also ICOs that are lying to their teeth about specific parts that they advertise on their website, for example, partnerships. It seems that in the crypto industry, whenever you meet someone at an event saying hello and shaking their hands, you are partners. And I'm talking about companies like Microsoft, IBM, Google. We investigate and we call and contact in order to make sure and validate that these companies actually are partners, and it's completely wrong. It doesn't exist.
Interesting. So we're going to come back to that one. Martin, is there something you want to add to that?
Oh, I totally agree with your point of view. And we have seen some ICOs. We supported Definity, for instance, in the race here in Europe and Arweave, and built also some wallets around for them, especially for Arweave at the moment. And you would be surprised at some of the ICO decks that we get, that the multiple from the first round to the round, basically when they really go public, is sometimes 50 to 100. So the first investor actually invests like 3 months before, gets like a far lower price, and then you go to the public and you pay like 50 times the price. But there is no value adding because there is no product life. So you have to really think about it. Maybe even like classical VCs or other players are also pump and dumpers.
Fredrico, I'm curious, what is Shyft doing in terms of solving problems in terms of fraud?
Well, we looked at some of the most fundamental issues within the space, and we started sort of tackling those as some of the initial use cases that Shyft is building. Shyft itself is a quite fascinating project in that we actually are working on the infrastructure layer within the ecosystem. So we are actually creating a protocol that we envision becomes this global fabric that enables further connectivity and, again, allowance for transmission of trusted data. So when we're talking about trusted data, what exactly is trusted data here? We're talking about accurate financial data. We're actually talking about a true identity behind the transactions, which seems to be one of the most complicated sort of situation when you're talking about from a legal and regulatory perspective. So we decided to build one of the main use cases, or the initial use cases rather, on Shyft to focus on solving the identity solution by facilitating compliant KYC and AML infrastructure within the protocol layer.
Excellent. So I'm curious, Martin, is there anything you want to add to that? Like what is being done from your point of view in terms of fraud and how to fix it?
I think fraud has different perspectives. So you have a legal perspective, right? So who's the owner? Who can you identify? Then you have your restriction. You have to find that your restriction, especially across borders, super complicated. But then you have the technical perspective. The problem with the blockchain is once the transaction goes through, it's irreversible. So you actually have to do everything before you do a transaction to get informed. You have to maybe think about the identity of the other person, but there are also some technical things. So we have developed a key management system because we figured out that 10% of the users actually lose their private keys every year. It's not necessarily fraud, but it's a security issue. 50% of the private keys on Bitcoin are lost forever, right? So it's very important for, let's say, humanity and the classical end user to have a good experience, but still be the sole owner of the funds and the possibility to recover that. And we developed this like for 6-7 months just to get that on the streets, because either you're a custodian, you own the funds, and you're a bank. We don't change anything with that. It's equally expensive, even more expensive because you have cybersecurity risk. If you have MyEther wallet, MetaMask, people are maybe not ready for that, so we developed something in between.
So there's something that you just said I want to touch on before we ask James a question. You said 50% of private keys are lost forever. How did you come by that?
Is a question for me?
Sorry, for you. And then I've got a question for James.
I mean, you can actually do chain analysis and see how active they are. And most of these private keys, or let's say wallets, are not active for many, many years. And there is a statistic, there are some facts that just happen. People just die, and they don't pass on the private key, for instance, to their husband or wife. That happens a lot. Or for instance, what happens in organizations, that people just steal private keys, send the funds somewhere else, and how can you prove that this person has them? It's impossible. It's irreversible and anonymous. So these kind of things are, for us, like still a huge, huge challenge. And if you don't solve them, how can you actually run identity on top of them? Because then people just lose everything by just not being educated enough or don't have real technology running around them.
So I don't know about you guys, but if something happened to me in terms of fraud, the first thing I want to do is call the police. And the second thing I want to do is I want to call my lawyer. So James, with that in mind, what can the sector do to protect itself?
Well, the first thing it can do is, so there are two sorts of fraud that you're going to be subject to. The first is attack from an external fraud, somebody who's trying to get your money, okay? The second type is the third wave I spoke about. That's when you've got money. Everyone's a communist when there's no money. Everyone works together. We're doing it pro bono. We're a team. He's in Israel. He's in Africa. Doesn't matter. We're all together. What I find as a lawyer, and I'm afraid it makes me slightly cynical, is that as soon as there's lots of money comes in, that group identity tends to fracture. Okay? And that's the point at which you wish you had in place agreements, things in writing. It's not that everyone is dishonest, it's not that at all, but everyone slightly remembers the conversation differently, and it's usually to their advantage, okay? So it's just a way we tend to work as people. So what can we do? Well, for external, we've got to get much better as a community at doing AML and KYC. I've had a number of conversations yesterday and today with people who didn't really see the distinction, okay? And another conversation I've had is with people saying, well, my product does this, my service does this, it's on the blockchain, it's provable. But that old computer saying garbage in, garbage out, you know, half the time I'm not hearing, how are you going to verify and guarantee the information that's going into that first chain, okay, first block? Because if it's not verifiable, you've started off with rubbish and it's going to be rubbish all the way through. So getting it right at the beginning, and then internally making sure you've got everything in place when everyone's happy and cooperating.
So the third thing I would do after I've called my lawyer is making sure I've got a good company that can definitely help me fight fraud. And so I'm curious, what does Cointelligence do in terms of that?
So what we do is we do in-depth analysis, and we divide our work into 12 different categories, and each category has about a dozen of subcategories. We review everything on about the company, from the website, the white paper, everything about the founders, the social media activity. One of the most important things that we are reviewing and analyzing is the risk factor. Even if an ICO or an STO got a specific score, it's very important to check the risk factor. You can see very clearly that it's aligned with many things that we find after that later on. Now, we also use technologies that we developed in order to analyze things like, for example, duplicated content. If we find that there is duplicated content on the website or the white paper, it's very much aligned to scams. Not all of them are scams, but if some of them have a few pages copy and pasted, then it means that something is wrong there, and it's making us very suspicious about it.
Okay, that's good to know, thank you. So Fredrico, I'm curious, what do you think is the role of regulation in this space? Because next thing I'm thinking is, why isn't my government protecting me?
Certainly, I can definitely talk about regulation quite a bit, given the fact it's one of sort of biggest topic. I don't want to call it the obstacle topic is the most appropriate thing, but I do want to sort of talk about also what On sort of was mentioning in terms of their technology and how do they go about solving some of these issues. and how we essentially view it from Shyft's perspective and some of the technologies that we've incorporated to be able to sort of further assess within the same construct that you're participating in, such as integration of technologies associated with social physics, for example, to be able to create predictive behavioral patterns to be able to detect a potential for causality before actually causality takes place. And I think that's one of the key things in order for us to go about really protection and prevention. When it's done, there's nothing that you can do. But going back to regulation, specifically given the fact that we seem to be very short on time, regulation plays a huge role in this space. It actually plays a huge role in every single sort of sector that you wish to participate in. In our viewpoint, regulation should not be very aggressive, should not stifle innovation in any sort of shape or form. Regulation needs to work in tandem, in conjunction with innovation, in conjunction with entrepreneurs, to be able to identify what the pain points are for the entrepreneur, in conjunction what the pain points could potentially become for the participants in any technology or any sector for that matter. They need to become, in our viewpoint, more lenient and take on less aggressive positions towards technologies, projects, or businesses that they have less familiarity with. And we're seeing that to change over time. We're beginning to see a lot of jurisdictions. We've seen Malta, we've seen Bermuda specifically, to be very quite aggressive with opening themselves up from a regulatory perspective, facilitating what we call sandboxes to enable small projects to operate within confinement before they can actually expand and scale out into the real world.
Excellent, excellent. So I'm curious, James, what do you think that crypto firms, why do you think they find it so difficult to meet anti-money laundering and KYC requirements?
Well, sometimes it can be down to simply the way they work. I'll give you an example. I used to work for a Russian law firm, and it was always a nightmare because in Russia, if you have a successful business, the chances are you're paying the mafia to stay in business. And if your business is very successful, you run the risk of them coming and saying, keys, please. And if you don't pass the keys over, you don't wake up in the morning. So it's very common for business owners in Russia to hide their ownership of the business, okay, using nominees who have nominees who have nominees, okay, for completely legitimate reasons. But then they come over to the West and they try and open a bank account, and the bank just thinks they're mafia, which is kind of very ironic. So there's a company, for example, EP90 Group, just as an example, EP90. Have a look at their website, okay? It's all about automotive security. But actually, they're a pretty big company that does, they're run by the head of the Metropolitan Police in London, their head of cybersecurity. And they do a lot of crypto work, helping trace assets and things like that. But you'd never know it from the website. Another problem is you keep it secret. There's a lot of, what's happening now is that just as you can't break into a car, so they break into your house to get the keys, now people are being beaten up and attacked to get their keys. Okay, so people will say they'll come around in person, and suddenly there's 3 guys there, and you're beaten until you hand over the keys. So keep it low key is my answer. No pun intended.
Definitely. So I'm curious, and we got to wrap it up here, but I'm really curious. What is the quickest way to know if an ICO is a scam? And also, is there anything you want to say about advisors?
That's a good question. So the quickest way and the most simple way would be just to check the images of the team. Many of the scams that we found is just using other people's images. Sometimes it can be celebrities, sometimes it can be just another person and doing that. Also, usually the owners of the websites that are trying to scam are using very cheap templates. They don't invest in the design, they don't invest in anything in the website, they just get it up and running. And about your questions regarding advisors, I think that the advisors in the industry, and I am allowing myself to talk about advisors because I have been an angel investor and advisor for a few startups before I got into crypto. And I know how much it takes from your time and how much effort it takes. And when we look at many of the ICOs out there, we see advisors that their picture is on about 30, 40, sometimes 50 websites. I don't understand it. Maybe they can duplicate themselves, maybe they added more hours to the day, but I don't see anyone able to advise to more than a few companies and do it properly. So I would say that the current situation with the advisors in the industry is not good, and I would check each and every one of them very closely to make sure that they are actually advisors, and it means that you should actually contact the founders, contact the advisors, ask them the questions. That's what we do.
Excellent, excellent. And we have to wrap it up, but Martin, I'm curious, is there anything you want to add? I know that you have a few things you want to say.
I would be very careful investing in ICOs in general, especially when you don't have an information edge. So if you go in very early, then of course you can eventually flip it. But even like the top protocols with the top investors in the world, they perform really poorly at the exchanges at the moment. So you really have to think about what is the edge, what is technology. At the moment it was all about protocols. At the beginning it was all about dApps. Now everyone talks about security tokens. I think there are probably just in a couple of years 10, 15 protocols that really work. And then there will be some applications running on top, a lot of financial applications, I assume, personally. Gaming will be pretty big. There will be also some dApps, but I would urge you, if you're not really an expert, or not really close to the company, don't invest. I would probably put it somewhere else.
Okay. And last 1 minute. Guys, if you could each take 30 seconds to tell the crowd what you think they should take away. Fredrico, we'll start with you.
I think the takeaway from this conversation is that there's a lot of room for the industry to mature. We've sort of gone through the bubble, if you want to sort of see that as such. Again, human nature to me doesn't change, so bubbles will essentially be recreated. However, bad actors sort of have been pushed off the scene for at least a good percentage of them. I think individuals need to do, as indicated by my colleagues here, they need to really do true due diligence when it comes down to participation in any form of investments. I've never actually taken part really in ICO forums myself, personally. We never actually went about doing an ICO. So we look at things to be done in the most diligent way possible. So I encourage everyone here, as you wish to participate into various different technologies, get to know truly what the underlying technology is that is being offered. Understand the fundamentals associated with that. Understand the team, understand the background associated with the team who's actually participating in this technology. And yeah, be very quite cautious. That's sort of my take on this.
Excellent, thank you. James?
2 takeaways. The first one is, please take more effort to find out who you're dealing with. Okay, On's point about everyone's dealing with Microsoft. I had a client who was convinced he was dealing with a Rockefeller, as in the Rockefeller family in London. Guy was spending money, staying at the top hotels, going out, having cocaine about every 40 minutes. I mean, just living the playboy, somewhat degenerate lifestyle. It was all set to sign up with him. It was going to give him £1 million to do a deal. We checked him out, his passport, fake passport, not a Rockefeller. Do your homework about who you're dealing with. You're not at the moment. Second takeaway is fix your house, your roof while the sun's shining. Okay, plan for success. Get your shareholder agreements in place. Get your intellectual property rights, ownership sorted out. When big company comes along to buy you, they're going to be buying your brand. They're going to be buying your confidential information. If you haven't sorted it out now while it's cheap and easy and quick to do, what are they buying?
I'd like to add to that, actually, if you don't mind, and I think that's a very key point. Literally, do look at technologies that are looking to patent various different components of a technology, which I think is extremely important.
All right, we're going to give 15 seconds to Martin, and then 15 seconds to you, On, and then we're done.
I mean, what do you want to know? so pretty
good? Okay.
Yeah, I personally believe that we are really in the build phase. I would put money for developers. Obviously, we are a software technology company, so it makes a lot of sense. But I think it takes a lot of time until we see also the mass adoption everyone speaks about. And it's really about decentralization in most of these cases when there's a utility token. There are some security token aspects, but then you go back into the old world, all the regulation gets more expensive. Cross-border transactions get also really restricted. So if you want to invest, if that's what you're looking for, then I would look at decentralized hardcore tech teams and would look closely at investments of Polychain, Andreessen, and these kind of guys, because they have a strong investment hypothesis, even for the next 10 years. And yeah, if you just want to invest in Bitcoin, where I strongly believe in, yeah, check out maybe also our wallet technology, or if you know some companies that need some technology, shoot me an email.
Excellent. Thanks, On.
So first, I would like to
15 seconds.
point out that after you heard everything that we said here, don't run away from blockchain and crypto. This is the biggest revolution that ever happened to us, and I quit everything that I did before that, and I put all my efforts and my time into that. Second, don't trust anyone. Don't listen to your friends telling you that this is the best investment in the world. Don't listen to a CNBC interviewer that has a scam on the show, and we proved that it was a scam. Don't listen to anyone. Don't even listen to me. Do your own due diligence. Use the tools that you can use, but do your own due diligence and don't count on anyone to do it for you.
Okay, well, thank you guys. We really appreciate this. Thank you. Thank you.